This week, we're looking at something we haven't seen in years, with Brisbane's property market showing signs of cooling and what that could mean if you're looking to buy. We're also getting a much clearer picture of the priorities shaping each part of Greater Brisbane over the coming year, with all 5 councils now having handed down their budgets. And there are more changes affecting everyday life across Greater Brisbane, from public transport to new e-bike crackdowns through to planning decisions and preparations for major events. I'm Adam, and this is the Brisbane channel, where we help make sense of what's happening across Greater Brisbane. Let's get updated. Let's start with the housing market, because after years of seemingly unstoppable growth, Brisbane is showing signs of something we haven't seen for quite a while. Several major property indexes have now reported that the market has cooled over the last month, although exactly how much depends on which data set we're looking at. PropTrack says Brisbane's median house price fell 0.2% in June, the city's first monthly decline in about 3.5 years. Meanwhile, Cotality, formerly CoreLogic, still recorded a small 0.3% increase for Brisbane, but described the national market as now being in decline after recording the biggest monthly fall since 2022. If you're wondering why those figures don't match, you're not alone. The reason is that these companies measure the market in different ways. They use different data sets, different methodologies, and slightly different timing, so it's not unusual for the monthly numbers to differ. What matters more is that they're both pointing in the same direction. The pace of growth has slowed considerably. And it's not just the price indexes suggesting that. Auction clearance rates have fallen noticeably over recent weeks, agents are reporting fewer people attending open homes, and sellers are increasingly listing asking prices up front or adjusting their price expectations after homes spend longer on the market. SQM research says asking prices across Brisbane have also been easing, particularly in some inner city suburbs, suggesting vendors are becoming more realistic about what buyers are prepared to pay. Most analysts point to a combination of factors rather than a single cause. 3 Reserve Bank interest rate increases this year have reduced borrowing capacity, ongoing cost of living pressures continue to affect household budgets, uncertainty following the federal government's changes to negative gearing and capital gains tax has caused many investors to pause, and global economic uncertainty has also affected buyer confidence. But the story doesn't end with existing homes. New figures from the Australian Bureau of Statistics also show Queensland recorded the largest fall in dwelling approvals in the country over the latest monthly reporting period, with total approvals down 8.8%. It's important not to overinterpret a single month's data. Building approvals can be quite volatile, but if approvals remain weak over a longer period, it could make it harder to increase housing supply in the years ahead. Industry groups argue that higher construction costs, labour shortages, financing costs, and the recent federal tax changes are making new developments harder to get off the ground. The federal government, on the other hand, says its reforms are intended to encourage more investment into new housing rather than existing homes. Whether that happens is something we'll likely only be able to judge over a much longer period. So what does all of this actually mean? For existing homeowners, a modest slowdown after years of rapid growth doesn't necessarily mean prices are crashing. Brisbane values remain dramatically higher than they were just a few years ago. For buyers though, particularly first home buyers, conditions may finally be becoming a little less frantic. Several agents say they're seeing fewer bidding wars, less fear of missing out, and buyers taking more time to make decisions. Whether this becomes a short pause or a longer correction is something economists disagree on. Some expect the market to stabilise once conditions improve, while others believe it could take a couple of years before confidence fully returns. Either way, after several years where it felt like Brisbane's housing market could only move in one direction, the conversation has clearly started to change. If you run a local business, you'll know that finding new customers can be difficult and expensive. Sometimes the biggest opportunity is simply encouraging the customers you already have to come back more often. That's where Royalty Rewards comes in. It's a Brisbane-developed digital loyalty platform designed to help local businesses reward repeat customers and build stronger relationships with the people already walking through their doors.
Rather than trying to explain everything here, I've put together a short video that walks through exactly how it works, along with details of the current free trial opportunities available for businesses that get involved early. You'll find the link in the description below, and even if you don't own a business yourself, if there's a local cafe, salon, tradie, or other small business owner in your life who you think could benefit from something like this, feel free to send it their way.
While we're talking about the future of Greater Brisbane, we've also now reached an interesting milestone, with all 5 councils having handed down their budgets for the year ahead. Rather than going through every project today, I wanted to give you a quick overview of the themes emerging across the region, because each council is tackling a slightly different set of challenges. Brisbane is continuing to focus heavily on preparations for the 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games, alongside transport, major infrastructure, and maintaining services for a growing city. Logan's budget places a strong emphasis on growth, with continued investment in roads, parks, and community infrastructure as one of Australia's fastest growing cities continues to expand. Ipswich is balancing rapid population growth with the need to catch up on infrastructure, while also putting strong focus on financial sustainability after several challenging years for the council. Over in the Redlands, there's a noticeable emphasis on maintaining existing infrastructure, environmental management, and planning for future growth while trying to preserve the area's unique character. And in Moreton Bay, the budget continues the council's focus on transforming from a largely suburban area into a major city in its own right, with investment across transport, economic developments, and community facilities to support that transition. Taken together, they paint an interesting picture. Every part of Greater Brisbane is growing, but they're not all growing in the same way, and the priorities of each council reflect that. I'll be taking a much deeper look at each of those budgets in a dedicated video soon, because there are plenty of interesting projects and decisions that deserve more than we have time for in today's update. So what else is changing across Greater Brisbane this week? One of the biggest changes came into effect this week, with Queensland's new e-mobility laws now officially in force. Police have relaunched Operation Surety, a statewide enforcement campaign targeting illegal high-powered e-bikes and e-scooters, dangerous riding, speeding, helmet offences, and drink riding. The new laws also give police stronger powers to seize illegal devices, while lower speed limits now apply in areas where riders are sharing paths with pedestrians. And police haven't wasted any time putting those new powers into action. Within the first 24 hours, officers issued 50 infringement notices, seized 14 illegal devices, and laid the first drink riding charge under the new laws. As I mentioned when these laws were being debated, there's a wide range of views on where the balance should sit between encouraging e-mobility and improving safety. But now that the legislation is in place, the focus shifts away from what the laws say to how they're actually enforced and whether they make a measurable difference. The first day of enforcement gives us an early glimpse of how police intend to use these new powers, but it'll take much longer to judge whether the laws actually change behaviour and improve safety. That's something we'll be tracking over the coming months. There's also some encouraging news for train passengers, although services aren't back to normal just yet. Queensland Rail has reached an in-principle pay agreement with unions representing around 3,500 workers, roughly half of those involved in the current enterprise bargaining negotiations. That means some progress has been made, and planned industrial action around the state of origin has now been withdrawn. However, negotiations are continuing with several other unions, and Queensland Rail says the reduced timetable will remain in place for now while maintenance backlogs are cleared and the remaining agreements are negotiated. And while we're on transport, Moreton Bay residents are again raising concerns around whether public transport is keeping pace with the region's rapid growth. A new local campaign is calling for improved bus services around Morayfield, Burpengary and Caboolture, with residents describing long walks to bus stops, limited connections and growing pressure on already busy train station car parks. It's a reminder that building more homes is only part of the growth equation. As communities expand, the roads, public transport and other infrastructure need to grow with them. While we're talking about the way Greater Brisbane is changing, I'd like to thank another of this week's sponsors. If you're planning on updating your home or workspace, I really recommend you contact channel sponsor YB Painting. The multi-award-winning team offer fixed pricing and a 5-year warranty on their work, so you know exactly what you're getting up front. You can claim your exclusive 10% discount by scanning the QR code on screen or through the link in the video description. And growth also raises some important questions about how decisions are made. The first example involves Brisbane City Council, which has approved a series of changes to its governance arrangements, including changes to delegated decision-making powers and the way some council information requests are handled. The council administration says the changes will streamline decision-making and improve efficiency, but they've also prompted concerns from Labor, the Greens and independent councillor Nicole Johnston, who say they reduce transparency and oversight over important council decisions, including the sale of public land. Rather than trying to squeeze that whole debate into today's update, I think that one deserves a closer look. So over the coming weeks, I'll be putting together a dedicated video unpacking exactly what changed, why the council says the changes are necessary, why others are concerned, and whether they could fundamentally change how some important decisions affecting Brisbane are made. Those questions about how we shape our city also connect with another story that's unfolded this week at Kurilpa Commons, on the border of West End and Highgate Hill. The community garden was established during the COVID pandemic on state-owned land and has since grown into a well-used community space for local residents. This week, police arrested several protesters after fencing was erected around the site, which the Queensland government says is being prepared for future housing development. This isn't the first time the site's future has been contested, with similar protests taking place last year during an earlier attempt to fence off the land. Whether you see this primarily as a housing story, a planning story, or a community story probably depends on your perspective, but it does highlight one of the increasingly difficult questions facing Greater Brisbane. How do we create enough new housing while also deciding which existing places and spaces are worth preserving? There are a few other updates worth knowing about. The Queensland government says it's still negotiating with Cricket Australia in the hope of bringing the first test back to the Gabba before the stadium is demolished after the 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games. The government is pushing to host the opening test against India in the 2028-29 summer, as well as the 2029-2030 Ashes series, before Test cricket permanently moves to the new Brisbane Stadium at Victoria Park. Another interesting development this week was the Queensland government's decision to allow It's only a one-off trial at this stage, but it's an interesting example of how regulations can be adapted around major sporting events. With Brisbane preparing for the 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games, it'll be interesting to see whether we see more changes like this in the years ahead. And finally, there's some welcome news for many households across Greater Brisbane. Urban Utilities has confirmed it will pass on the state government's 2-year bulk water price freeze to customers, joining Unity Water, which made the same commitment earlier this week. That means households across much of southeast Queensland won't see increases to the bulk water component flowing through over the next 2 years, although your final water bill will still depend on decisions made by your local water retailer. At this stage, I just want to say a quick thank you to everyone who supports the Brisbane channel through channel memberships or buy me a coffee. One of the things I'm trying to build with this channel is something a little different. Rather than simply reporting what's happened this week, I want to keep following these stories over time, dig into the details, hear from people with different perspectives, and help make sense of what it all means for Greater Brisbane. Support from members and people who shout me a coffee helps make that possible. It gives me more time to attend events, conduct interviews, dig through planning documents, and produce the longer-form investigations and conversations that go beyond the weekly updates. If you'd like to help support that mission, you can become a channel member using the Join button below, or shout me a coffee through the link in the description or by scanning this QR code. And if that's not for you, that's absolutely fine too. Watching, commenting, and sharing these videos is a huge help, and I'm grateful for everyone who's part of this community. Now, before we wrap up, here's what's on my radar over the coming months. I'll be digging into some recent Brisbane City Council changes that have sparked debate about transparency, accountability, and not only who gets to make important decisions, but also who has access to information about those decisions. The Queensland Government is also reviewing the state planning policy, including proposed changes that could affect everything from housing developments to environmental and hazard protections. That's another one I'll be following closely as consultation continues. There are also proposed changes to Queensland's road rules that could have a real impact on everyday drivers. They include making social media use while driving an aggravating factor in sentencing, shifting responsibility for seatbelt offences from drivers to adult passengers in some circumstances, and several other proposed reforms. There's still proposals at this stage, but they're well worth watching. I'll also be following the rollout of Queensland's new e-mobility laws to see how they're enforced in practice, whether they improve safety, and whether any unintended consequences emerge once they've been in place for a while. And finally, there are several ongoing stories I'll continue tracking, including Queensland Rail's industrial negotiations, the direction of Brisbane's housing market, and the dedicated council budget breakdowns I'll be bringing over the coming weeks. Before you go, I've linked a couple of videos I think you'll enjoy. This one explores why Brisbane City Council operates so differently from every other council in Australia, and I think it'll provide some really useful context for upcoming investigations I'm working on. And if today's stories about housing, planning and growth got you thinking, I'd highly recommend my conversation with Professor Tony Matthews about why cities like Brisbane change over time and some of the planning challenges that come with that. Thanks for watching, and we're done.